On a crisp December day in 1872, a British brigantine named De Gradia spotted a phantom-like ship drifting aimlessly in the Atlantic. As the crew drew closer, they realized with growing unease that the vessel was completely silent. No crew on deck, no answering wave from her helm. This was the Mary Celeste, a sturdy merchant brigantine that should have been well on her way to Italy. Instead, she was found abandoned off the Azores, under partial sail and eerily devoid of any living soul. Thus began one of history's most chilling maritime mysteries, the mystery of the Mary Celeste. To understand how this ghost ship came to haunt the waves, we must start at the beginning with the ship's own origin and the people who entrusted their lives to her. The vessel that would become Mary Celeste was born on the shores of Nova Scotia, Canada, in 1861. Built of sturdy oak and rigged as a brigantine, she was originally christened the Amazon, a name that soon gained an unlucky reputation. During her maiden voyage, the Amazon's first captain took ill with pneumonia and tragically died. Not long after, the ship collided with another vessel in the English Channel and later ran aground off Cape Breton Island in 1867. These early mishaps gave the Amazon a shadow of misfortune, as if the sea itself had marked her as a cursed soul. In 1868, the battered ship was sold to new American owners, including an experienced seafarer named Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, after a major refit and repairs. Briggs rechristened her Mary Celeste, perhaps hoping a new name would wash away the vessel's dark past. Captain Briggs was a deeply respected mariner, a God-fearing New Englander from Massachusetts who had spent decades at sea. By 1872, 37-year-old Briggs had achieved a sterling reputation. Some say he even considered retiring to a quiet business on land. Instead, he invested his savings into a share of the Mary Celeste, believing he could turn the hard-luck ship into a success. To Briggs, this voyage wasn't just another job, it was a family endeavor and a new beginning. He handpicked a crew he trusted, rejecting anyone he deemed unsuitable. His first mate, Albert Richardson, was actually a relative of one of the ship's owners and had sailed with Briggs before. The second mate, Andrew Gilling, was a young seaman of Danish descent, and the ship's steward, Edward Head, came with a personal recommendation from the owner. Rounding out the crew were 4 skilled German sailors from the Frisian Islands, all described as peaceable, capable men. Confident in his ship and crew, Briggs made an unusual decision. He brought along his family. His wife Sarah and their adorable 2-year-old daughter Sophia joined the voyage, while their older son stayed with relatives at home, with husband, wife, child, and a picked crew of 7. The Mary Celeste set out with high hopes and no hint of the doom that fate had in store. The fateful voyage. The Mary Celeste's voyage began in late autumn of 1872 from New York Harbor, carrying a cargo destined for the Old World. On November 5, 1872, Briggs oversaw final preparations at Pier 50 on the East River, loading a stock of 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol bound for Genoa, Italy. This industrial alcohol was highly valuable and highly volatile. Still, as Briggs wrote in a final letter, "Our vessel is in beautiful trim, and I hope we shall have a fine passage." After a brief weather delay, the Mary Celeste set sail out of New York on November 7, 1872. She carried 10 souls in total: Captain Briggs, Sarah, little Sophia, and 7 crewmen, all provisioned with enough food and water to last 6 months at sea. The ship's route would take them across the vast Atlantic, south of the stormy North Atlantic lanes, toward the Strait of Gibraltar, and onward to the Mediterranean. It was a routine voyage for a seasoned captain like Briggs, or so it seemed. For 2 weeks, the Mary Celeste battled heavy Atlantic weather, gale-force winds, and rough seas, tried the cruise metal as they sailed eastward. The ship was tossed and strained, but Briggs kept her on course. By late November, they neared the Azores, a remote cluster of islands, the last stepping stones before mainland Europe. According to the final log entry, recorded at 5 a.m. on November 25, 1872, the Mary Celeste had reached a position about 6 miles off Santa Maria Island in the Azores. At this point, the worst of the bad weather had passed. The seas were calmer, and land was finally in sight. One can imagine a glimpse of relief on Briggs's face. The hard part of the voyage was over. Yet, that very night, something would occur that altered the ship's destiny forever. The entry on November 25th was the last ever recorded in the Mary Celeste's log. What happened after remains shrouded in silence. Unbeknownst to the Mary Celeste, another ship was following on a similar west to east path across the Atlantic. The Dei Gratia, a Canadian brig under Captain David Morehouse, had left New York City a week or so after Briggs. Morehouse was actually an acquaintance of Captain Briggs. Some accounts even claim they dined together before their respective departures. The Dei Gratia's journey was uneventful until the afternoon of December 5, 1872. On that day, about 400 miles east of the Azores, the helmsman of the Dei Gratia spotted a distant vessel wavering erratically through the waves. The ship's sails were set in a confusing, halting manner. Through his spyglass, Captain Morehouse recognized the ship's profile to his astonishment. It looked like the Mary Celeste, which by now should have already arrived safely in Genoa. Why was she out here, still far from port, and seemingly adrift? Discovery of the ghost ship. As twilight fell on December 5, 1872, the Dei Gratia cautiously approached the wayward brigantine. The sea was choppy, and a brisk wind whipped at the stranger's sails. Captain Morehouse hailed the vessel, but no reply came. The only answer was the slap of waves against the hull and the creaking of untended rigging. The Mary Celeste cut a forlorn figure still sailing, but with no one guiding her. Sensing something was very wrong, Morehouse sent his first mate and 2 hands over in a small boat to board the drifting ship. The boarding party clambered up Mary Celeste's side and onto her decks, calling out for any survivors. They were met with an eerie silence. Belaudix. The scene was unsettling and puzzling in equal measure. The crew's quarters and the captain's cabin were undisturbed, as if their occupants had just stepped out and might return at any moment. Clothes hung neatly in their places. The crew's personal belongings, even valuables, were left behind. In the galley, there were no signs of a sudden disaster. In fact, there was over a 6-month supply of food and fresh water still stocked. The ship's charts and papers were found scattered about, as though someone left in a hurry. On deck, the boarding party discovered one ominous absence. The ship's single lifeboat was missing. It had been launched, or perhaps torn away. The rope that usually tethered the lifeboat was frayed and hanging over the side. It became clear that Mary Celeste had been abandoned at sea. But why? The condition of the ship offered cryptic clues. There was about 3.5 feet of water sloshing in the hold, a significant amount, but not enough to threaten a vessel of that size. The cargo of 1,701 barrels of alcohol was largely intact, though a handful of barrels were later found to be inexplicably empty. On the deck lay the ship's pump, partially disassembled, suggesting the crew had been struggling to gauge or reduce the water in the hold. Crucially, the captain's navigation instruments, the sextant and marine chronometer, were missing, presumably taken into the lifeboat. The last logbook entry was dated 10 days earlier, confirming that Mary Celeste had been drifting, unmanned, for over a week. Yet the ship was still in sound, seaworthy shape. Her hull was strong, her masts secure, and her cargo and stores secure. It was as if the crew had vanished into thin air, leaving a perfectly operational ship to wander the open ocean on her own. When the boarding party returned to the Dei Gratia with their strange report, Captain Morehouse could scarcely believe it. The Mary Celeste was not wrecked or burned. She was simply empty. The men of the Dei Gratia felt a chill. The term ghost ship suddenly felt very real as they stood on those decks, devoid of humanity. Nevertheless, Morehouse decided to bring the Mary Celeste in. Splitting his already small crew, he ordered his first mate and a few others to sail the derelict brigantine, while the Dei Gratia escorted her. Over the next days, they painstakingly navigated the two ships 800 miles to Gibraltar, arriving on December 13, 1872. The voyage was arduous. One sailor later wrote that the ordeal of towing the ghost ship to port was so taxing he could hardly tell what I am made of. But they succeeded. The Mary Celeste had been saved if only her people had been as well. The recovery of the Mary Celeste and the fate of her missing crew became an immediate sensation. In Gibraltar, a formal salvage hearing was convened on December 17, 1872, to investigate the incident and decide on rewards for the salvors. The local Attorney General, Frederick Sally Flood, led the inquiry and suspected that something nefarious might lurk behind the mystery. For over 3 months, officials examined the ship and questioned the Dei Gratia crew in exhaustive detail. They found no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle or violence on board Mary Celeste. Some small stains on a railing and on a sword found in Briggs's cabin were tested, but turned out not to be blood. The cuts on the bow of the ship were determined to be old marks or caused by natural wear, not battle damage. The crew of the Dei Gratia were scrutinized under the suspicion that they might have overtaken the Mary Celeste and harmed her crew to claim salvage, but nothing incriminating surfaced. In the end, the court could only conclude that the Mary Celeste had been abandoned for unknown reasons. The Dei Gratia sailors received a salvage award, but significantly less than expected, only about 1/5 the value of ship and cargo, a hint of the lingering cloud of suspicion and uncertainty. Officially, the case was closed, with no definitive answers, and the Mary Celeste was released to sail again. Unofficially, however, the mystery was only beginning, and it seized the public imagination like wildfire. In the absence of an official explanation, theories and speculation ran rampant. What could compel an experienced captain, with a loyal crew and his own family on board, to suddenly desert a sound ship? Over the years, investigators both professional and amateur have proposed a kaleidoscope of possibilities. From the rationale to the fantastical, on the logical end, many pointed to natural disasters or accidents. Perhaps a sudden waterspout, a tornado at sea, struck the Mary Celeste, drenching the ship and startling the crew with a fierce whirlwind. Such a waterspout might have flooded the decks and made it seem as if the ship was foundering. Others suggested an undersea earthquake seaquake could have jarred the hull, or a freak wave might have slammed her side. Yet the Mary Celeste survived heavy weather intact. Was there something more subtle at play? Another pragmatic theory involves the ship's volatile cargo of alcohol. Could leaking alcohol vapors have built up and suddenly ignited in a fearsome but invisible explosion? One idea was that an explosive vapor cloud might have blown open hatches and filled the air with smoke, panicking everyone to abandon ship before the vessel itself caught fire. However, when Mary Celeste was found, her main hatch was secured in place and no burn marks or scorching were evident. In fact, later analysis showed that 9 of the barrels, those found empty, were made of a more porous red oak that likely leaked out their alcohol naturally, meaning an explosion was not necessary to explain the missing liquor. The hatch hadn't blown off at all, so if not fire or storm, what about a sudden mutiny or piracy? This too seems unlikely. All the valuables were still aboard, and no trace of violence or struggle was found. Pirates typically loot treasure and cargo, yet nothing was plundered. A mutinous crew might have seized the ship, but to what end? They never turned up with the vessel or cargo, and by all accounts, Briggs's crew was exemplary and devoted. Indeed, when some pointed fingers at the 2 German crewmen, the Lorenzen brothers, because their belongings weren't found aboard, it emerged that the poor men had lost everything in a prior shipwreck, and thus owned next to nothing to begin. In short, no earthly hazard or human treachery clearly accounts for the empty ship on the waves. Where facts fall short, fantasy takes hold. The mystery of the Mary Celeste has inspired some truly bizarre and supernatural explanations. In whispers and tabloid tales, people imagined the crew falling victim to sea monsters, perhaps a giant squid or monstrous octopus dragging men to a watery grave. Others suggested the ship was cursed or haunted, her crew snatched by ghostly apparitions. In 1884, famed author Arthur Conan Doyle, before he created Sherlock Holmes, published a short story embellishing the mystery. Writing under a pseudonym, Doyle rechristened the ship the Mary Celeste, and wove a lurid yarn in which a vengeful former slave murders the crew and sails the ship to Africa. Though intended as fiction, the tale was so vivid that many took it as a true account, further entrenching false legends into the Mary Celeste lore. Since then, the abandoned ship has been roped into every manner of speculative myth. Some have cried alien abduction, claiming extraterrestrials whisked the sailors away by force. Others have hinted at time warps or dimensional portals on the sea that might have engulfed the vessel's people. In pop culture, the Mary Celeste is often mentioned in the same breath as the Bermuda Triangle, that notorious region of ocean where ships and planes supposedly vanish mysteriously. In truth, the Mary Celeste was found thousands of miles from the Bermuda Triangle, nowhere near its boundaries. But that hasn't stopped imaginative writers from invoking Bermuda's supernatural forces to explain the inexplicable. As one commentary wryly noted, connecting the Mary Celeste to the Bermuda Triangle was likely a creative imagination of an author, yet the link persists in the public mind. These outlandish theories make for great storytelling: sea curses, ghost crews, and alien kidnappers. But they offer little concrete insight. Still, they demonstrate how deeply the Mary Celeste has embedded itself in our collective psyche. We're willing to entertain any possibility, no matter how fantastical, to solve its riddle. Amid the swirl of speculation, modern researchers have revisited the case with fresh eyes and new techniques. One such investigation, featured in a 2007 documentary, The True Story of the Mary Celeste, applied scientific analysis to the known evidence. The findings have shed light on a compelling scenario that could explain the mystery without invoking the paranormal. According to this research led by documentarian Anne McGregor, a confluence of environmental and human factors likely led Captain Briggs to make a desperate but rational decision to abandon ship. First, they discovered the Mary Celeste's chronometer ship's clock was likely faulty, meaning Briggs may have miscalculated his position by as much as 120 miles. Believing he should have sighted land already, Briggs may have grown anxious when the Azores did not appear when expected. Second, McGregor's team found evidence that the ship's pumps were clogged, probably by sawdust and debris from a recent refit or coal dust from an earlier cargo. The clogged pump meant Briggs could not accurately gauge how much water the ship had taken on after the storms. Indeed, the disassembled pump found on deck supports this. The crew likely took it apart to fix it and restore function. Now, imagine Briggs's predicament on that morning of November 25th. His ship had just endured terrible weather. He finally glimpses Santa Maria Island, but his vessel is waterlogged. His pump isn't working, and by his navigation, he's behind schedule and off course. In addition, a key tool, the sounding rod, used to measure water in the hold, was later found on deck, suggesting the crew was actively measuring the flooding. It's very possible that, in those critical moments, the sounding rod's readings perhaps misread, without a working pump made. Briggs believed the Mary Celeste was slowly sinking, with his wife and child's lives at stake. The captain may have decided to take to the lifeboat while they were still near land, rather than risk everyone going down with the ship. If Briggs gave the order to abandon ship, the entire complement would have hurried into the lifeboat, perhaps lashing it via a rope to the Mary Celeste, intending to return once the danger had passed. But then catastrophe struck. A strong gust or another wave could have severed the tow line, or perhaps a sudden squall pulled the ship away from the lifeboat. In an instant, their only refuge, the Mary Celeste, would be sailing away without them, leaving 10 souls adrift in a small open boat on the vast ocean. It's a heartbreaking scenario, one of human error and tragic misjudgment rather than mystery, but it fits the known facts. As one scientific skeptic summarized, a faulty chronometer, a malfunctioning pump, and a false fear of sinking could have led an otherwise prudent Captain Briggs to make the fateful choice to abandon a ship that ultimately did not sink. Sadly, the sea would not give them a second chance. In the wake of such theories, one might think the saga of the Mary Celeste is finally solved, but in truth, the mystery endures. To this day, no definitive evidence has ever surfaced to confirm exactly what happened in those fateful hours after November 25, 1872. The fate of Captain Briggs, his family, and his crew remains an open question. Their bodies were never found, and no lifeboat debris ever traced. The Mary Celeste herself outlived her infamous voyage by more than a decade. After the Gibraltar hearings, she was repaired and returned to service, sailing under new owners. But sailors are a superstitious lot, and many viewed the ship as a harbinger of bad luck. She bounced between owners and struggled to find profitable work, her name forever linked to the unknown. In 1885, in a final twist of irony, the Mary Celeste was deliberately run aground on a reef off Haiti by a fraudulent captain attempting an insurance scam. The scheme failed, and the once proud brigantine was left broken on the rocks to be slowly swallowed by the sea. Thus, the ghost ship ended her days in ignominy. Yet the legend of the Mary Celeste was only just beginning. Her story has taken on a life of its own, capturing the imagination of generations and earning an immortal place in pop culture and maritime lore. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's 1884 short story, though fiction, reignited popular interest and firmly established the Mary Celeste, or Marie Celeste as he called it, as the quintessential haunted ship. Ever since, the tale has been retold and embellished in countless forms. Writers, historians, and filmmakers have all tried their hand at interpreting the mystery. She has inspired novels and appeared in history books as an enduring enigma. In 1935, Hollywood produced The Mystery of the Mary Celeste, also released as Phantom Ship, a thriller starring Bela Lugosi that imagined a murderous madman on board. More recently, a 2020 horror film Haunting of the Mary Celeste spun a supernatural twist on the legend, showing that our fascination has not waned. Documentaries and TV specials regularly revisit the case, including the Smithsonian Channel's investigation in 2007. Which brought modern forensic techniques to bear on the old puzzle. The very phrase Mary Celeste has entered common usage, shorthand for any situation that is bizarre and inexplicable, the ultimate unsolved mystery. What is it about the Mary Celeste that keeps us coming back after more than 150 years? Perhaps it's the sheer spookiness of a ship found in perfect order, but utterly empty, the crew seemingly erased without a trace. It is a narrative that invites the imagination to run wild, a maritime whodunit with Mother Nature as the prime suspect. The Mary Celeste forces us to confront the ocean's vast unknowns. In an era when transatlantic voyages were routine, this incident reminded the world that the sea can still guard secrets and swallow lives without so much as a witness. The story's longevity is also due in part to those early embellishments and myths, which blurred fact and fiction. It became hard to tease out truth from tall tales, and so the mystery took on a mythic quality. Even today, researchers sift through archives and test new hypotheses, hoping to find that one clue that previous generations missed. Perhaps a piece of the lifeboat will wash up someday, or a long-lost message in a bottle will surface, but until then, the fate of the Mary Celeste remains an unsolved riddle. In the end, the mystery of the Mary Celeste endures, not just because of what we don't know, but because of what it symbolizes. It's a haunting reminder of the power of nature and the fragility of human life against the elements. It's also a testament to our love of a good story, one that is tragic, romantic, eerie, and compelling all at once. The Mary Celeste sails on in our collective imagination, a phantom ship forever caught between fact and folklore. As long as people are drawn to mysteries, the tale of the Mary Celeste will continue to be told, a ghostly saga afloat on the ocean of time, challenging each new generation to unravel its secrets and daring us to voyage into the unknown. And so, the mystery of the Mary Celeste remains unsolved. A ship found adrift, her crew vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions that have baffled historians, sailors, and storytellers for over a century. Was it nature, human error, or something more sinister? We may never know the full truth, but the legend lives on. As we close this chapter, we want to thank you for joining us on this journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery with us, make sure to like this video, share it with fellow mystery lovers, and subscribe for more incredible tales from history's shadows. What do you think happened to the Mary Celeste? Was it a storm, a mutiny, a supernatural force? Drop your theories in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and never stop searching for the truth.